Does Michigan have an answer for Georgia's star freshman tight end Brock Bowers? I think the real question is, does any team have a real answer for Brock Bowers? I mean, he has absolutely balled out this year in a tight end room that features an athletic freak in Darnell Washington, someone who a lot of people thought was going to break out. Well, guess what? It wasn't him. It was Brock Bowers who has taken over as Georgia's number one tight end and Georgia's number one weapon all year long. Ryan Curley from Dog Post here, talking about Brock Bowers, talking about Michigan's defense a little bit. Can they handle him? I don't know. And make sure to check out dogpost.com. Check out our $2 for 2-month deal we got going on. It's an amazing deal, actually, and you should check it out if you're not a subscriber. So, Brock Bowers, freshman from Napa, California, 6'4", 230 pounds. I got his stats pulled up. I've watched him all year long. I've watched him dominate all year long. On the season, 47 catches for 791 yards and 11 touchdowns. Add a rushing touchdown to it. They can get Brock Bowers involved in a variety of ways, and that's the thing that makes him special. How dynamic he is. He can block. He can take a screen for 80 yards. He can take a post for 77 yards. We saw him do that against Georgia Tech. He can go over the top and moss you in the end zone. We've seen him rush for a touchdown. We've seen him run. He's averaging 14 yards per carry, just a handful of carries, but when they get him involved in the run game on little sweeps in the backfield, it's difficult to stop because he's so big and fast. And honestly, the first time I saw him run like that, I remember in the UAB game where he just took one to the house and no one touched him. Brock Bowers is a special talent, and he's been Georgia's best weapon all year long, and no defense has really had an answer for him. With game script, he gets a different amount of targets each game, but when they target him, he is successful. He has been Georgia's number one target all year long. He, in the Clemson game, he had the most yards. Game script was against that, but he had 43 yards on 6 catches against Clemson. Kind of a mid-level game for him because you can argue he's boom or bust. He had against Florida 1 catch for 38 yards, against Tennessee 2 catches for 23 yards, against Missouri 2 catches for 39 yards, and against Charleston Southern 4 catches for 36 yards. Georgia's a loaded offensive team. It's a loaded team in general, but on offense they are especially loaded at the skill position. Brock Bowers has been competing for touches and looks all year with guys like Jermaine Burton and Adonai Mitchell, Darnell Washington, James Cook, Karis Jackson, Lebaconki. Should I go any further? Now he's competing with George Pickens for looks out there. Georgia's offense is loaded with talent, and Brock Bowers is at the top of that list right now with the way he's playing. Does Michigan have an answer for him? I don't think so. And I don't think any team really does have an answer for him. He dominated against Alabama. 10 catches for 139 yards and a touchdown. And if you saw his touchdown, boy, the way that he was surrounded by 4 defenders about 20 yards out from the end zone and still made it into the end zone off of a screen pass. I mean, he caught this behind the line of scrimmage. He's a special talent, and he's made all sorts of plays all year long. Maybe the most that's probably the most impressive one. He has his flaws. I think he could have had another touchdown against Alabama. He was double covered, but the ball definitely hit his hands. Maybe he could have caught that. But when Brock Bowers is involved in the game script, good things happen for Georgia. Now, obviously, I think any Georgia fan or anyone really can agree, Georgia will be more successful if they look to Brock Bowers and find ways to get him the football because he's just that good. I mean, he's a freshman All-American. I want to say it was Max Preps or 24/7, someone of that nature. Maybe it was 24/7. Has him as the freshman of the year. He's a true freshman. He's 18 or 19 years old. I don't know what his age is. I probably could pull it up, but he's a true freshman. He's not a redshirt freshman. He came into a tight end room that we were expecting to see have Darnell Washington, John Fitzpatrick, and Eric Gilbert. Obviously, Gilbert didn't play. John Fitzpatrick's not much of a factor, and Darnell Washington hasn't been involved the way we thought, and the way we thought he could / should. And so you see Brock Bowers emerge, and all of Georgia's skill positions are just loaded with older talent too. Guys like James Cook, Kyrus Jackson, Jermaine Burton, Zamir White, guys that have been there, have done that. And it's this freshman that comes in and dominates and is Georgia's number one target all year long. He leads the team in reception, touchdowns, and yards. I mean, the dude's been an absolute animal, and he is going to need to be involved heavily, I think, against Michigan and against if Georgia wins that game against whether Alabama or Cincinnati, whoever wins that matchup, probably Alabama. We've seen Brock Bowers succeed against Alabama. I mean, he had 4 just impressive games where he had at least 100 yards and a touchdown, and in 3 of those he had 2 touchdowns, and then he had another 2 touchdown game. Brock Bowers has 5 2 touchdown games. That's ridiculous. He scored 2 touchdowns against UAB. He scored 3 touchdowns against Vandy if you add the rushing touchdown. He scored 2 touchdowns against Kentucky. He scored 2 touchdowns against Charleston Southern. Even though he only had 36 yards, doesn't matter. He was involved and he scored 2 touchdowns. And then he had 2 touchdowns against Georgia Tech, 1 great catch in the corner of the end zone, and 1 where he caught the ball on kind of a smaller or shorter post route, and no one touched him. He blew by everyone on Georgia Tech's defense. I think my jaw dropped when I saw that in person. I was sitting there watching that from the press box. I think my jaw dropped a little bit just at his speed, and the first time it dropped was against UAB. His speed. You just don't think someone's going to be that fast, but Brock Bowers has it all. He has the size, the strength, the speed, the ball instincts. He can run, he can block. There's not really a huge flaw to his game. And Michigan is going to be the best defense that Georgia has faced since Clemson. Clemson was the best defense that Georgia faced all year. They're one of the 3 or 4 best defenses in the country. No matter what type of year Clemson had, they have a really good defense with a lot of guys. Michigan is probably second behind Clemson as far as defenses that Georgia is going to face, how good they are. And if Michigan wants to be successful, Brock Bowers is the guy they're going to need to shut down. Well, here's the issue, is that Georgia could have all sorts of guys out there on the field at the same time. You throw in a healthier George Pickens, you throw in a dynamic James Cook, you throw in Darnell Washington. You have an issue there if you're trying to double cover Brock Bowers, because then it becomes, well, one of these guys is going to be open. And that's the issue. When you have someone that good, like Bowers, you have to put attention on him. But when you have a loaded offense, like Georgia has, it's difficult to double team. And I think his mere presence out there is going to be a real problem for Michigan. I don't think they have anyone that can guard him toe-to-toe. I don't think their linebacker group is their best group. I think their defensive line is obviously where they shine with a guy like Aiden Hutchinson. But a guy like Aiden Hutchinson, as good as he is, the Heisman runner-up behind Bryce Young, and as talented as he is not going to drop back and cover Brock Bowers. So does Michigan have a star that can really shut him down? I know they have a good secondary, but they're going to have to, they can't just focus on one guy here because of how many dudes Georgia has that can just flat-out ball. And the guy that can just flat-out ball the most this year has been Brock Bowers. We'll see. I still think George Pickens is the most talented offensive player on Georgia's team, but Brock Bowers is right up there with them. And if Pickens is healthy and you have Pickens and Bowers out there at the same time, watch out. How are you going to cover them? You can't double them both, and they both warrant a double team because they're going to beat you one-on-one. They're going to blow by you. They're going to run better routes than the defenders can guard, and they can definitely moss you. So Brock Bowers is going to be an issue for Michigan, especially with the potential. I said it on a video before. Just imagine if you have these 5 guys out there. If you have Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers, and then you have Pickens and Burton on each side, and you have James Cook and how dynamic he is in the backfield, with Stetson Bennett who can run, who can make plays with his legs. That's a dangerous offense that can really mess up a Michigan defense that hasn't seen, the only other time they've seen that much offensive talent this year has been against Ohio State, and they played very well against Ohio State. Ohio State has 3 or 4 receivers that are going to be in the NFL. 2 of them are going to be first-round picks this upcoming draft. Michigan did a very good job there. Can they do it again? Can they do it against a guy like Brock Bowers, who has been sensational? That's the question. whether Brock is out there just kind of as he'll never be just a decoy, but the attention will be on him, and his presence out there is going to be an issue for Michigan. So, if you want to know more, dogpost.com is where you should go.